Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Hi, my name is Luke Nicholas Lodli Wajeni ni Angats. Nawani wakita loda nya daga ni wagohanjod. Hasani wasawadlo ni wagosliago. Ne wagatsa nuniji yogwaja dalolox ne gonto. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. I hope everybody is having a wonderful day. It absolutely looks beautiful outside. National Aboriginal Solidarity Day, National Indigenous Day, is a day to celebrate Indigenous contributions to Canada, to the fabric of Canada, and today is no different. It's an opportunity for us to share ideas, concepts, to share words, and I really want this presentation to be about a conversation really between us all, because there's enough, I think, a few of us here that we could definitely accommodate that. I think is that right, Chelsea?
Absolutely. And just so that everyone knows, we will be recording the sessions today, which is why the video and the audio is turned off. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat to one of the co-hosts on the Indigenous team, and we'll bring it up to Luke. So I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. So, ne dalanaya dagwani hagano yage. Tesino is yagwe go to scanning junior jello gone to Ohantak dagoya again has. Hagagoscana Hagohage, Gonto Yogojak the Lolokse. Again, my name is Luke Nicholas, but my spirit name is Dudley Hojani. My grandmother gave me that name when I was about 2 months old. It means he talks a lot. So I don't know why I thought I'd have trouble filling 2 hours. But I just wanted to say that before we begin and before we start the discussion today in my presentation, I'm living with some people that are moving, and so there might be some slight noises and jumbles in the background, and they're trying to be silent for me today, and so I'm thankful to them and grateful to them and to you all for your understanding, your kind understanding. I was born on Oneida First Nation, just not far from here, from London, Ontario. I'm in London, and I was born in 1981. And when my mother tells the story the best, I absolutely love it. She said that when the night that I was born, she was holding me and feeding me, and she said she had closed her eyes for only a moment, and then she could hear rattling. And she opened her eyes, and there were 10 elders all around the hospital bed. And she said they were wearing clothing from before the colonial times, before the white man had come here. It was all buckskin, and they had these rattles and shakers. And she said they were singing, and my mom got scared, and she started crying because she thought that they were spirits that were there to take me back to the spirit world. And so as she sat there crying, she closed her eyes, and when she opened them up again, they were gone. And the reason that story is going to become so important for the purposes of this conversation is that it was the spiritual journey that I've been taking since then, and a big part of that spiritual journey is the gifts and the two-spiritedness that has been handed down to me. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those concepts, two-spiritedness. We're going to talk about where they may have come from, some of the contention around it. We're also going to talk about some of the historical trauma that has led our community to where it is today with respect to Two-Spirit, and or at least certainly from my perspective. And a friend of mine, Harlan Pruden, who is one of the tremendous community leader, has been leading community health for many years in New York City and Long Island, right, and now in British Columbia and Edmonton. So he's been doing a tremendous job. He has contributed today's presentation with a PowerPoint that I'll be showing in just a moment. So just to give you some context and idea for what we're hoping to, I think, talk about, or what I'd like to get across is how did we see Two-Spirit people in traditional times, pre-colonial contact. and what has happened since, and where I think we're probably going with it. Because it raises a lot of questions in our community today. For instance, in some communities, women cannot sit at the big drum. But what if you're a male identifying as a woman, or you're transgendered? You know, and so there's all kinds of these situations that come up, or that only women can pray for water, and so there's all kinds of ceremonial protocols and related issues. Now, I don't think that I have one answer on all of that, and certainly I don't think we're going to solve that soon, and there'll always be that debate and that discussion, and so we want to be able to approach these subjects very sensitively, culturally appropriate, and to really just work and be kind to one another as we explore these concepts and these ideas, because for many of us that grew up as two-spirited in our community, it wasn't kind. It wasn't a kind place for us. We lost a lot. Many people have lost their lives, and as a result. And so, because of a heavy colonization and Christian doctrine through the residential school era, which again we're going to explore a little bit more in this presentation. So I really wanted today to be really an opportunity for an open discussion. I like it better that way. I present a few concepts, and then maybe some questions. And so feel free to ask questions at any time through the chat, as mentioned by Chelsea, because it helps us stimulate where it's better for us to have a conversation that's meaningful, to hear a presentation that's meaningful, so that you want to know at least some perspective on the various topics that we'll be covering. So, and I'm very easy like that in terms of flexible, and when I to be honest, I'm a bit nervous, just because I'm nervous about the Zoom thing, where you have to just continuously talk. Normally I'm I'm 2 feet or 10 feet away from people, and I'm able to exchange ideas, and I guess telling a joke on Zoom is the same as telling a joke in person, but the only thing is I can't hear the laughter back. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult, because that's it. We draw, and that's part of what social distancing is doing to us, is that we're missing that piece, and being able to draw on each other's energy. And so we're going to do the very best that we can today, I think, or that I can, and certainly in trying to make this something that's informative, that's fun, that's light, that's going to help bring and raise that consciousness in our communities, because many of our young people are facing this issue today. I think there was a statistic that most millennials will have a same-sex relationship, or not most, 25%, which is significantly higher than it used to be in the past. 25% of millennials will have experienced one or more same-sex relationships, which is astounding. It's the numbers are significant.
Apologies, everyone. We always have technical difficulties. Our technology is a blessing and a curse, right?
Absolutely.
It allows us to reach far and wide, but then sometimes, depending on weather systems in different places, or just fluky stuff, we miss out. So thanks for hanging in there and bearing with us, and hopefully Luke will be able to get it all set up momentarily. So thanks for hanging out.
Melanie says, no problem at all.
But I can entertain you a little bit. I hope you guys are doing stuff where you can keep yourselves busy. I always like to try and keep myself busy. But one of the things I like to do when I'm listening is keeping my hands busy, because it allows me to be more relaxed and to pay better attention sometimes. So
Oh, are you still there, Ange? We didn't lose Angela too, did we?
did
Oh,
you
there we
lose?
are.
Oh, okay. So nobody heard what I was saying?
I heard that you like to do stuff with your hands to basically not be idle, and then you cut out a little bit for me at least.
Oh, okay. All right. 'Cause it did just say internet connection was a little bit wonky.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Great.
So you're probably glad that I'm back, right, Angela? Our entertainment. So we left off with what Angela likes to do with her hands when dot. Okay. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen again today, and as I mentioned earlier, there may be some people that are coming in and out throughout the chat today. So all of the questions and comments will go through the chat. Just a quick reminder, and it can happen at any time. Let me just set that up. Okay. Okay, so I think for the most part, everybody can see what I'm seeing now, right? Is that Chelsea? Can you see what I'm seeing?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I think we're good. So again, a good friend of mine, Harlan Pruden, whom I met a few years ago at the it's the 2Spirit of the Northwest conference in Long Island, provided a deck and a presentation on some of the historical pieces to 2Spirit and some of the work that's going on around the country right now and in the United States and into Canada. And I felt that I really liked what he had to say. He uses a lot of his work. He works a lot for health research, develops policies and best practice for health professionals that are providing or administering primary health care to Indigenous people, and more specifically to 2Spirit. So I felt like he had a really great presentation. He sent it to me this morning, and I really wanted to look and examine some of his slides, because it's really where I wanted to go with some of the conversation we have today. So some of them will be relevant and some of them won't be, but we'll make our way through it. And Chelsea, if there's some questions coming up, if you don't mind just giving me a bit of a nudge, because now that I'm in this sharing screen bit, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to be able to see if and when there's questions.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Thank you so much. So as we talk and we start to begin this conversation, we want to acknowledge, the Mississauga of New Credit and the many other Mississauga people that are living in and around this area, in the Durham area. This land is known is traditionally shared by the One Dish and One Spoon. An ancient treaty between the Anishinaabe and the Hungwahue people. This southern Ontario and southwestern Ontario, and Durham can kind of be connected in that as well. But in South Ontario here, this was known as the Happy Hunting Grounds. And then they called it the Beaver Hunting Grounds. And so because of the Great Lakes and where we're situated, excuse me, there was always a competition over this parcel of land. There's a lot of game here, a lot of animals, and so a lot of wars were fought over this parcel of land here. And so A lot of the treaties, that were talked about happened in this particular part of the world. The War of 1812 significantly was a significant this whole parcel of land all the way down into Detroit, and like the War of 1812 was so significant to the Americans, and that if you go into the Capitol building and into the Rotunda in Washington, the first mural depicts the War of Independence, and the second mural depicts the War of 1812. And for being such a small war and being such a short war, because there was so few people, I guess, that died during that war, people would think that it was not very significant, but it was super significant to the United States. It was super significant to Canada, and it was sort of one of our last military stands through Chief Tecumseh by confederating the 33 tribes. So the War of 1812 took place in this area. This is down in the Battle of Longwoods. That's where Tecumseh fell. The Battle of York is where Sir Isaac Brock fell. It was those two principal leaders during the War of 1812 that came out and made that agreement over lands and trying to stop Americans from continually coaching westward. So significant historical area, and I want to just acknowledge the Mississauga of New Credit and the Anishinaabe. And also, this was also a traditional land to the Hungahua as well at one time, and so there's a lot of history. Or when they exhume a village that's 2,000 years old, that village typically is Haudenosaunee or Iroquoian from the Wendat or the Huron speaking people. So I would like to have that acknowledgement for the people here. For the Indigenous people in the Durham area, there's quite a population of Indigenous people who are coming to live in the outskirts of, I guess, the what they call the GTA. So here's a painting that was depicted. I think it was Ken Monkman that did this one, and very, very, very interesting when you can see a lot of, obviously some homosexual relations going on here, and so he is really good at taking historical pieces, as probably many have seen in the residential school pieces that he's done. Just a tremendous artist, and one that I really felt like I wanted to have reflected here today. So I just thought it was a nice, interesting point here. You can see here, some African American, and you can see the I can never say that word, conquistador. Yeah. Helmet. I have an assistant here today too. He's helping me on the technical matters, and so sometimes I'll veer off and chat with him or ask him a question. So, I kind of wanted to impress upon some of the, some of the historical matters, historical things that I think really have had a significant impact, in our nation, in our communities. And looking at this, is the Alberta passes the Sexual Sterilization Act, begins sterilization of residential school students to prevent them from giving birth and continuing their culture. And of course, this legislation was repealed in 1972. So when people say that happened 100 years ago or 150 years ago, it was very recent, right? And the last residential school, in fact, closed in 1997. So, when people say, oh, that happened 100 or 200 years ago, say, no, this happened very recently. And still there continues to be a policy of indifference. The reason why I feel that, like, examining this part of our history is because it has a big impact on the state of two-spirited people as well, because we were equally victims, I think, of colonialism and even more so in some cases. 1933, BC begins the Sterilization, the Sexualization Act, and repealed in 1973. Even the City of London itself, I think there was a law on the books up until not long ago, where if you were an Indigenous person and you were walking down the street and a non-Indigenous person was walking on the sidewalk, you had to walk in the gutter. Like just things like that, yeah, you wouldn't believe still existed, but or just were recently repealed. So I want to go back to this picture here. But when Europeans first came to North America, one of the things that they saw here is that well, first how hard it was to live here, but they saw, most history books would have you believe that Indigenous people were just some primalistic, wearing breechcloths, dancing around fires and that kind of thing, and doing the whole, it's very interesting how they depict us as not as being not having discovered metal, for example, but it was the absolute opposite. We were at the height, I think, of an advanced peoples. You have to remember that that we introduced so many foods to the world. We introduced corn and beans and squash and potatoes. Before us, these were not existent anywhere else in the world. And so, how does in Europe, and there were very, very, very very limited foods. Foods were very bland. I mean, this is kind of what orchestrated the need to go to the Orient for spices. Native people. The other thing, and an interesting point, is that corn itself. Corn is a hybrid, and it was created. And so our people were scientists. We were making foods. We were creating foods out of splicing and putting together different seedlings to be able to create a food. And corn actually was made from a grass found in the Andes. We know.
Can you hear Luke, Ange?
I can't hear him. Can you hear?
Okay.
Can you hear us?
No, Carrie Ann and I can't hear him either. Are you still there, Luke?
No, he's frozen.
Okay. Can we send him a message?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Oh.
He gone. He got kicked out.
Yeah. All of the technical issues today.
Yeah.
You know how many people are doing things today? That's why.
Yes. Everything is virtual, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, and everybody still has school. Everybody has work, and we're doing all these Indigenous things today. So
That makes some sense. When I see Luke reconnect, I will add him back in. But Ange, I think you were talking about what you're doing with your hands and your beading.
Yep. So I can share that. Yep. So that's what I was talking about. So like I was saying, you heard Luke say a little bit about something about the one dish, one spoon, which is that teaching that that we would have had among each other, our nations, where we agreed to, we all live off those resources in that area. Eh? We all hunt the same area. We all fish the same area. We rely on those resources, those plants, those medicines. So I'm making a pair of moccasins, and I'm having two different teachings on them. So the one is one dish, one spoon. And then on my one finished one, I've got around the edge the two row wampum. So that is that teaching that reminds us that you stay in your lane and we'll stay in our lane, right? We won't steer your canoe, you don't steer ours. So I just, it was the first pair of moccasins I decided to add teachings to. So, but yeah, I like to keep busy. It's, and I actually learned that way of being able to stay at peace and be calm by doing that from working with residential school survivors. I could conduct a circle, and some of the survivors, they shared very little, nothing of real meaning. But if I could bring something out, if we were creating something, then they began to share their stories. So I think that is a powerful connection that we have towards our healing, is being able to connect.
Sorry, we lost the hydro went out there for a minute.
There we go.
Hi there. I'm on my cell phone. The hydro went out. Must be a storm brewing somewhere. Wow. If anybody's had a significantly hard time in staying, keeping this presentation afloat, it would be me. Thanks you again, Angela. I appreciate that. And just going off what Angela, like we had that Gaswanta, the 2-row wampum. And that was so incredibly important because it served as the very first basis of our treaty making process. And it's something that I've been fortunate to be born into a family where we maintained a lot of our culture, we maintained a lot of our identity. We lost a lot for sure, but we were able to maintain. I think they did it in secret a lot, and they had to hide the ceremony. It wasn't, I think it was 1972 or 73 when they actually started coming out of the secret basements and the basements of people's homes, and they used to do it down by the river and in different locations. So there's a lot of historical trauma. So going back to that, what happened in the very beginning of colonial times, two concepts that I want to share. One is called terra nullius. That is a Latin term that describes really the Pope. Europe, you have to remember that 97% of the earth was colonized by Europeans. 97%. And so they often, there's a picture which I had in the program of a woman or a man with a sword in one hand and a Bible in the other. And so the kings and queens who were going off wanting to expand on their territories and their lands and resources and wealth, they were hitting these places, these brown people with brown eyes, and indigenous people and Africans and Indians and Asians. And what they were getting there is they said, well, there's people there. There's people there. How do we do that? Well, we can't really expand when there's people there. So the kings and queens went to and asked the higher power, well, Pope, what do you think? And it was the Pope that said, if these people are not God-fearing, then they are not people. And do what we can to secure the lands and resources for God Almighty and for Jesus Christ. And so that was essentially the basis behind the terra nullius and the doctrine of discovery, is that that these people don't know what they're doing. Already it was this idea that they don't know, they're heathens, they don't know the way, and we'll show them the way. Right from the very beginning, that has been the I think the thinking behind the initial colonization process, and still even today, it's still reflective in today's politics. I should let you know that in addition to being a bit of a historian, I am a registered federal and provincial lobbyist. So I work with many governments, ministers and prime ministers, cabinet members, senior political aides, as well as members of the bureaucracy, the senior civil service. So I know, quite frankly, what kind of attitudes exist in these places. And it's very difficult for them to understand the concept that there's an indigenous, excuse me, sorry. It's very hard for them to understand the concept that the indigenous people have rights. They believe that they are of the belief that as them representing the crown, that they are giving the rights to us. But it's actually the opposite way around. We are extending the right to them, to the crown. And then in turn, the crown can extend rights onto it, but they have turned that all around. But so there are many pieces to this puzzle, specifically around the dominance that colonized or settler governments have orchestrated to diminish us of our inherent right and our treaty rights here in the country. And so it's as many of us, many of you know, if you are indigenous in this country, there is a law that describes what you can and cannot do, what rights you do and do not have. And there's no African American Act, there's no African Canadian Act rather, or there's no Black Act or White Act or Asian Act. There's an Indian Act, and in the Indian Act, of course, is born out of British North America under the BNA, the British North American Act. It's the only piece of legislation that managed to survive all these years. And for those of you that have been in Ottawa, have ever been to Ottawa, if you look at the main parliamentary building, and then you look to the left, it's called Confederation Building. That building has thousands of offices in there. And do you know the number one vocation of the people who worked in there at the beginning, around the beginning of Confederation, or whenever, or at the time, or when it was built? They were all land surveyors. They were land surveyors. And their job was to go out and to parcel off Canada to the regions and to Ontario and to all of the provinces and give them this authority. Kind of interestingly enough, in 1996, when Quebec was voting to be in a referendum to decide whether or not they wanted to stay part of Canada, the federal government had what they called the ace in a hole. And they had a discussion paper that was kind of top secret. And they said, had the French voted yes to separate from Canada, Canada would then pursue them to take the land back that belonged to the indigenous people, which happened to be 2/3 of Quebec. And then we would have them rejoin Confederation. If they needed to use it in a pinch, they would. They acknowledge that we have a right. Canada continues to break those rights all the time, even with the passing of this of the new law of UNDRIP, accepting the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. It is a good step forward, obviously, much better than I ever thought it would be, but it does not bring to focus the full expression of what our rights are, and certainly it does not bring justice. It does not bring justice, and it does not bring teeth. So we're I think leaders are closely examining these different pieces of legislation that are going on. So again, just to piece all of this together, when early colonizers came to America, they came here with a specific mindset that if you're not God-fearing or believe in Jesus Christ, then we had a right to take your land and resources. And in fact, I remember hearing this little parable one time about how an elder said, when you came to me, I had my land and you had your Bible. You asked me to sit and pray with you, so I sat and I prayed with you. You asked me to close my eyes while I prayed, so I closed my eyes while I prayed. And then when I opened my eyes, you had my land and I had your Bible. I thought it was a really cute little parable, because it's so true. It's so true. We give up a lot, and it's kind of difficult to not talk about it without talking about all of the historical things that have taken place over time. 500 years of oppression to Indigenous peoples. And for those of you that are starkly aware, I'm sure you are, of the recent discovery of the mass graves in Kelowna. I guess now the count is, as they're uncovering from schools across the country, they're up to over 500 children in these mass graves. When I heard the news, and it didn't really stick with me at first, because I was like, 215 children, not realizing like how powerful, what an impact that made to the national psyche, that there's something wrong in Indigenous Canada, and that this policy still exists even today. You know, my sister called me up and just crying, and for good reason. And I just remember her saying, "They killed our babies," and then she got me crying. And you know, in 1960, it was just as fresh as it happened yesterday for us. And we have to remember and pay honor and tribute to those young people, those young children that lost their lives. I have to breathe through that one a little bit. It was and for what reason? For what reason did this happen? All across the country, you know, who would these young people have been? What would they have become? My grandfather was a student at residential school. My great grandmother was a student at residential school. And the day that Stephen Harper apologized in 2008 on behalf of Canada to all Indigenous people, I was sitting in my grandfather's living room. He's in a wheelchair, and my uncle, who is, by the way, all my aunts and uncles are world-class alcoholics. My uncle was sitting there. He was so drunk, he could barely keep his eyes open. And I started to cry, because I always understood and knew what residential schools were, but I didn't appreciate and accept it until that very moment. What it really was to know what residential schools were. Because I looked at my uncle, who could barely keep his eyes open, and I thought to myself, who would he be like had we not been interrupted this way? What would he have been? Would we still be, you know, traditional like people, or some, you know, some notion of them? Would he have been a doctor, a lawyer? Would he have been a shaman, or a storyteller, you know, a hunter, fisherman, a gatherer, a basket maker? You know, all these questions come about as what would our people have been like had we not been interfered with all those many years ago? And so, but you know, it has happened, and it happened for a very important reason. You know, to this interference into our nations was foretold by prophecy. In fact, they say that some of the prophets who talk about this time, they say the 7 generations, or the seven fires prophecy, and they talk about this interruption that's going to take place, and that some elders actually interpret that we're now living in the 7th fire, and that they say that there will be no 8th fire, that the seers and the fortune tellers will stop being able to see into the future, because there won't be one. And they say that there will be certain times that happens, and they say that these things will show as the passing of time, and they say that the partridge bird will lay its eggs in a tree instead of the ground. Every tree will die by type. Already the ash tree is gone, right? So, and there's other pieces of that prophecy as well. And so we know these things. We've already been told by Spirit that these things are going to come to pass. And so there is hope, believe it or not, there is hope. And they say that it has to be the children and the youth of that generation who have to pick up the fire, who have to pick up and put it and light the next fire. That it is possible that we could win this battle, that life can continue. So there't all kinds of things out there, and for many of us who are at home, who are social distancing, and corona virus and this pandemic, what it means to us and what it's doing to the world. I mean, there's a very easy feeling that we all are wondering what's going on in the world, what's happening, right? Why are we not seeing overflowing beds in hospitals on the news if this is such a huge pandemic? You know, why are we seeing hall room medicine going on in patient care? So these are very, why are we only one policy away from martial law to be able to stop people from coming together and assembling? The right to assemble and the right to is an essential piece of the American Constitution, and so when they stop us from being able to do that. So things are going on in the world. I don't know why. I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a conflict theorist, a conspiracy theorist rather. And so I'm always wondering what's beneath the veneer, right? Most people are, I think, to some degree. So there's a lot of events that have taken place from the beginning of colonialization to the expansion and to residential school eras, to the 60 scoop, to today's current climate of overrepresentation of children in the child welfare sector. There are more children in care, in the CAS care today, than residential schools and 60 scoop combined. Those are staggering numbers. That we have so many children living in the care of a children's aid society, and so we are struggling now to decide, now will these kids, will these young people pick up that fire? Will they do that? And part of that is our responsibility as adults and to some of our elders to make sure that generational fire continues to go on. So 2Spirit, what does that mean to all of us as we kind of go through our daily lives? Do we hear it often? Do we know what it means? Do we agree with it? Not with the lifestyle. Maybe we don't agree with the name. Some elders just said, well, yes, they're okay, but they just, we don't like the name. Why don't we like the name? Because no one has two spirits. So there's all these interpretations about what we think 2Spirit is, but nonetheless, there is a group of people that exists and I dealt and still continue to deal with the shame of being a 2Spirit, because when you get raised believing that it's wrong, it's a part of you that it always sticks in there somewhere in whether or not what or not it's right. It's still in there, and I still fight it. It's the same reason why when in some instances I can be I can be happy, joyous, and free, and when I get to Longhouse ceremony, I'm like that's really more manly, right? Yeah. So I always have to be careful about how where I am and who I am, and still even to this day. So it's not gone. And then I started searching, because I grew up traditionally. I started searching for our teachings on it. Well, what would our teachings say? So I went to our elders, and they despise the concept of gay or lesbian and 2-spirited. Some of them, they were disgusted with it. But there's some conditioning going on here, and that's part of the story that I want to tell you about. Is that it has to do with our historical, which is the Christian, the Christian influence over residential school era. So if you let me paint a picture, essentially what that picture tells me is that 97% of the earth has been colonized by Europeans, and they did so with a sword in one hand and a Bible in the other. And so where we weren't battling, they were when they realized that they were going to subdue our people. Thought, they thought to themselves, why go to war with them? Why fight them? Because certainly they couldn't go to war with us in the beginning and win. They didn't know the land. We knew the land. 20 Indian braves, as they call them, could take out a thing of 500 men, British artillery. So there was no way for them to actually go to battle with us and win. So what did they do? They started something, a spiritual war, because Indigenous people never understood what religion was. They didn't understand this concept of religion. They thought this was a way of life. And so some of the Indigenous people, a lot, they liked this idea or concept of, well, what happens after you die? That you go to this place called heaven. And it's great, but the only way you get there is if you abandon all your ways and you stick to the Christian values. And one of the other aspects that is really interesting is how much alcoholism that was happening at the time as well. So as probably most would know, a lot of Indigenous people were addicted to alcohol by the 16th century, 15th, 16th century. And a big part of that is that Indigenous people were not exposed to processed sugar, which was in the alcohol. We never had processed sugar. That's why we have issues of diabetes today. And so that made us particularly susceptible to alcoholism and addiction because our bodies could not break it down. And so for a long time, and still even today, many Indigenous villages were just literally falling over drunk because they tasted a little bit and their body immediately hungered for the sugar. And so the enzyme, and it's a very interesting physiological connection, but nonetheless, that's one of the historical traumas that we do have as well. Now, moving up to sort of some modern times, some of the things that we're dealing with today is we have social issues that are rampant in our community, and especially around child welfare, as I mentioned before. More children today in the care of CAS than the residential school and the 60 school combined. That is a real problem, because what are the young people going to do? In my community alone of the Oneida First Nation, 70% of my community is under the age of 30. 70%. It's significant. They're all babies and children, and so that's an important number to keep thinking about, because we have a relatively young population. A lot of them are descendants of intergenerational grief and trauma, and how they're able to find their healing and bring about good medicine and healthy in their lives it's a significant matter. Now, for me, growing up in Oneida and not knowing and not realizing I was different, I was really, really different. I was abandoned by my natural parents when I was only months old, and my aunt, my maternal aunt, my mother's sister, brought me into her home and raised me. But she was also an alcoholic, and so I was raised with alcoholism, left, right, and center of me. I could not bear the thought of raising a child, in those kinds of conditions. But that's how it was back in those days, and it had a huge impact on me. When you're abandoned as a child, you have a tendency to grow up and wanting to. You become a yes person. You become a doormat. You become the person that wants to say yes to everybody. That you want their acceptance and their love, and so you'll do anything. So now, being 2-spirited. Sorry, just one moment, folks. Sorry, guys. Some of the local kids are playing by my door. Anyway, so then growing up, being 13, 14, and realizing that I was, that I was attracted to, other boys, and I was like, oh geez, I thought, I honestly believe that the Creator was doing something to hurt me, that the Creator didn't want me to, that he was punishing me for something, and that fit the narrative of my belief in my head that there was something wrong with me already. And so I didn't have any elders to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. And, I certainly couldn't talk to anybody about it. And I certainly couldn't talk to anybody. And so I decided that I'm going to go where other people like me were. And it was a bar, it was a gay bar. And so I had to figure out and find my identity at a gay bar, or at least try. And that's not the healthy place, by the way. Don't ever go to gay bars to find out who you are. In fact, I just recently participated in a conference call with the Association of Native Child Family Services of Ontario, and they asked, what do you think? What would be a good idea to implement for 2Spirit youth across the province? I said, have a mentorship program, create a safe space. Because you don't want to go to gay bars to find out what it means to be gay. Otherwise, you're gonna learn a very different life. And for a long time, it became a lifestyle of drugs, and alcohol, and it's just philandering, and it's not, and I, I'm not embarrassed to say those things, because it is the truth. And the truth is that many young people do not have a safe place to go and find out who they are, or to understand that they have that they're a part of a community that means something. It means something to us. We're learning about it, and so for a long time I carried on, and I didn't really understand my role in my community, and or if I had one, and I just decided to come out and to tell my parents. And I couldn't tell my mother for whatever reason. You could tell my father. You couldn't tell my could tell my father. It was Christmas Eve, and we're on our way back. We're on our way home from shopping, and I said, Dad, I have something to tell you. He says, yes, son. I said, I'm gay. And he said, he didn't say anything, actually. We just sat there. It was the most uncomfortable ride for the next 20 minutes. And I said, Dad, tell me you love me. Tell me you hate me. But tell me something. He said, well, you're my son, and I love you. But it was very, I know that he was shocked. It was hard for him to hear that. Because, all his buddies were these, rough and tough guys on res. And so I find it took a little while for him to learn and to accept, but he's amazing now. He's fully he's fully accepting. My mama, I had a tough time telling her, because there was a lot of history between her and I. My mom was the judge, jury, and executioner in our home, and so I felt particularly like I couldn't tell her, because I wanted her. I didn't ever want her to reject me. I'd already felt rejected from my biological parents, and so I didn't want my adopted parents to reject me either. So I tried to keep it from her. And then she started dropping little hints by leaving a book here and there saying how to understand your gay son or daughter. And it was pretty obvious at that point that she knew. And so I came clean, and so they have been working. I know it's been very difficult, but in Oneida, I find that the population has been very, very, very good at accepting two-spirited people. And then there wasn't some people as well. I had to deal with other family members who had a lot of mean and nasty things to say, people who tried to hurt me, physically accost me. And I remember going to school in grade 10, and I met this young man from White Dog Indian Reservation. He came to school for 1 year. It was kind of a cultural exchange program. He came to school for 1 year to London, and we became instant friends. he was a great guy. And basically we were like peas and carrots. We just walked wherever he was. I wasn't too far behind, and likewise, and vice versa. And so it was the very next year he went home for the summer. And come fall, September, I was like, oh, I couldn't wait. Grade 10, calling up the white dog was not a option, but I couldn't wait for him to come back. And so I waited, and suddenly he wasn't there. And I went to the guidance counselor and I said, what happened to this young man? What happened to him? And she said, dude, I need you to shut the door. So I shut the door. And she just very bluntly told me, she said, he was hung in his community because he decided to come out. He was hung by a tree. It's crazy. His own cousins did it to him. And these are the examples of the kinds of crimes, of hate crimes, that take place in our communities. And we have to acknowledge that and recognize that it's real, that these aren't, we're often looked at as the victims, and we are in some ways, in many ways, but there are subgroups within our societies that are victims as well. And LGBT 2-spirited, we are certainly one of them. The things that I've seen happen on my reserve, I don't even want to begin to tell you some of the gore and some of the stories. But nonetheless, this kind of behavior, this kind of this hurt and this pain that we between us has come from intergenerational grief and trauma imposed on us by residential schools. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, the church had designated men to not have sex, to be married to God, to be abstinent, and then they put them in charge of all the children around the world. Every brown peoples around the world are feeling the pain of that, of the sexual abuse that was experienced at residential schools. Generation after generation, this thing was handed down, and we asked ourselves, and that's why homosexuality has such a negative. It's not just the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, although the story of Sodom and Gomorrah has nothing to do with gays. But anyway, it has more to do with what happened at these schools, and around the world, brown people are feeling it. And I don't mean to make this an ethnic thing, but that's exactly what happened. So we can't forget what exactly happened. And from one generation to the next, sexual abuse became rampant in our communities, and we don't really talk about it. And now there's a whole culture. There's a culture that exists in the dominant society, right? They want to, if you even speak of the notion of pedophilia in society, they crash down, and they want to, and they're like, oh, the person's gonna die, we wish they were dead. Like immediately, that's the first thing that people say. But if I said, if I had to arrest or kill every man in the community, in one community that's ever done that, there would be no more men. That's how bad it was. And so we have an urgent responsibility to start healing and to take care of that, to heal our men, to heal our women, to make sure that our children are brought up differently than the generation before. I remember seeing a thing on Facebook that said, heal your traumas so your children don't have to. I really love that part. So there's a lot of historical trauma there. And we can see that sort of coming to light. We can see what's coming. Oh, sorry. Say hi, Mr. Buttons. Hello, Buttons. We can see a lot of this historical trauma coming to light even today. And so for many of our 2-spirited people that are trying to find their way forward, and trying to find out who they are, It's really, really difficult because there's no guidance or mentorship. And we have a population of people who were raised by the church. Our elders were raised by a church. And so how where do we go from here? By the way, I want to tell another story about when I finally decided to clean up my act, and I went to get some healing. I said an elder came and sat with me in Toronto, and I talked to him. And I said, he said, "There's something on your mind. One more issue out of the other issues that we're dealing with." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you think that the Creator is has abandoned me? Is he punishing me by making me gay?" He said, "You know, Luke," he said, "our people were extremely pragmatic. Everything that we need, we went hunting, we killed a deer. We used every part of that deer." He said, "from the hooves to the antlers, to the tongue, the stomach lining, the meat, the fur, everything. We used every part of it. So that's how much we knew how to use all the parts of every piece, no matter what it was, played a role." He said, "Now, if a man could hunt and fish and fight and protect, but could also love and nurture and care for, show compassion, and demonstrate all of those qualities, most masculine and feminine, they were considered a real asset to a nation." If you think about it, if you think about our people, about how we would be, why would we throw away a member of our society who has all these beautiful gifts? I started to cry, and I realized that that I did have a place. I felt like I didn't have to carry that shame all by myself anymore. I could let some of it go. And that's a big reality for a lot of two-spirited people that are living in our communities today, is able to let that shame go. And into knowing, and he went on to say that, he said that we were revered in our traditional societies. We were held up because we were respected because of the gifts that we had, because we often had responsibilities in our community. We were the medicine, we were the shamans, we were the people that brought good medicine, to our community. And you can see that in two-spirited people, that they bring that joy and that happiness to some people's lives, and so that's what he said. He said we would use all parts of the animal. Why wouldn't we use all parts of people? Anybody who had a skill, and it didn't stop there either. It was people that had a particular a gift, whatever that gift was. So it was then that my mind started to change about myself, about where I fit in the world. I want to try to open up my presentation if I can one more time. I know I'm doing all this by my cell phone, so I apologize. If you go back to early accounts of two-spirited people, well, first off, you have to look at the fact that the only people that were really recording anything outside of our traditional way, the people that were recording were the Jesuit priests. So as the explorations across and the discovery of Canada and the United States became clear, Simon de Champlain, Jacques Cartier, they all had a Jesuit priest on their and the Jesuit was the only one that could read or write, and so their job was to record all of the interactions and everything that they came across, and to report back to the Pope, or to the Vatican rather. So if you don't mind going down the screen. And it was through this process that they started talking about finding two-spirited people.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Let's go down. I do apologize to everyone for right there. I think there we are. That's good right there. Go back up. Sorry.
Do you want me this one or
Yep.
down?
Up a little bit where the two up. You were just on it.
I think this one. That the one?
Yeah. So we you know, as I was talking about, you know, we had various different roles in our community, and what role we would play, and this is actually work that of information that was gathered. Can't see the citation there, but this was a study that was done, and they pulled together some information from elders that talked about, well, what were the roles of the people in Two-Spirited. Well, a lot of the roles that Two-Spirited people played were like the mediators. They were the people who were the peaceful people who would try to find some alternative dispute resolution, or if there was a disagreement between clans, often a Two-Spirited person would come in and try to mediate that role. And I find, even for myself, I play that in my own family and in my community. I facilitate and MC a lot of meetings, and so getting, you know, and having that conversation with them, with our community members, and about how the community can find a way forward, often falls on the shoulders of people that are Two-Spirited. Some of them were able to make love potions, and they were the matchmakers. I don't know if I would be able to fill that role. I can't even fall in love myself. I gotta use two vats of potion on me. But this is some of the things that were said by the elders. Social workers, we were essentially the people who were who helped families stay together and make sure that, because I mean, we lived communally, you know. To live communally, that you know, today, you know, could you imagine that it takes a great deal of work to be able to you know, live across and see everybody, and you have no privacy, and like, could you imagine that's how life was. So it requires a lot of social workers to hold that community together. Name giving was also considered a pretty important role of the Two-Spirit. I really like that one, because I do a lot of, my grandmother tells us that we're the dreaming people. We're the people of the dream. We're the dreaming. We're the keepers of the dreams, she says. And when we sit around at my mother's house, you know, for special events or functions or what have you, it always ends up talking about dreams. We always end up saying, "What did you dream about last night?" And we'll dream about it, and then we'll all try to interpret it. It's really fun. And so that's where a lot of our names come from. They come from the dreams that we have. And of course, for many of us in our traditional in our traditional culture, our names are so beautiful. Like those spirit names. Like when we look at like my nephew's name is Niwajawase, and what it means is when a lightning bolt it hits the ground and it breaks into 4 pieces. Like how elaborate is that, right? My grandmother's name is Sayogalas, and what that means is it describes the air before the very first snowflake hits the ground of the season. Wow, how deep is that, right? And then you get to my name, which is so spiritual. He talks a lot. I mean, geez, where was the spiritual, beautiful names that were coming out? And I got those. And my sister's name is She Walks in Bare Feet. So all throughout our history, you know, our people are dreaming of these beautiful names that we've been given. So the Sundance is also one that has been where Two-Spirited people have been played a significant historical role with the Sundance ceremony. And I won't go too much into that, because I'm not a carrier of the knowledge for that. I don't have that information to give or to share. we're often the holy people. We were the seers, the fortune tellers, the people who could describe whether or not, who could see. They had the extra sensory thing, and I believe that to be true. I think all people can do it, but I think that in particular, two-spirited people have that gift. Boys and girls puberty ceremony, often involved in the in what they call the rites of passage. And so, like, in Anishinaabe cultures, they have the berry fast, and for us, we all have different ceremonies. But I think we probably had that too, that rites of passage, but we don't have that now these days. Just one moment, I just gotta remind people that I'm on the phone. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, the Hongwe people, the Haudenosaunee, we have different rites of passage, but they're not exactly the same. It's not like a berry fast, but maybe at one time we did have a berry fast. I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, we no longer have that rite of passage, and what it means to us. Like, so for a male, for example, in the Hongwe way, is that when the voice changes, they say. Changes from that. When you first feel that crackle in that voice, that's when they say that he has to learn the Oduwa songs, and so that's a rite of passage, right? Because they say that now his voice will change, and it will be more deeper, and his voice will connect to all of the ears of the longhouse, and so that's one of the things. And then in the Anishinaabe way, they have the strawberry, the berry fast. Such an elaborate ceremony, and beautiful. I believe that these kinds of ceremonies need to come back to our young people today to help them to be able to learn about who they are and their special role in society. But here's another question. I once met a young male-born female living. She was male, but she believed that she was a female. In her head, she was a female, and her parents, who just love and adore her, they of course accepted her belief about herself. So 9 years old, didn't know what does she do when she gets to puberty. Does she go on a berry fast? Does she sing the rites of passage songs of Oduwa? Very important questions of our day. Where do these young people go to get their ceremony done, and to teach them who they're going to be? It is absolutely my belief that if a child comes and they believe that that's who they are, then we follow it. I believe that 100%, that we give them that because that is who they are. Why would we take that away from them? And because of our own limiting beliefs, and not only that, like they will have that belief for the rest of their life, and we must make sure they'll have that understanding of themselves for the rest of their lives, and we must make sure that we are protecting them and giving them that cultural balance. Otherwise, if we are demonstrating our disregard or and discrimination against these young people, who knows what they could have done for us? That could have been the next peacemaker. They could have been the next prophet. They could have been, the next messenger from our Creator, warning us, or to give us information, or to share a new ceremony with us, or to heal some people. But we won't know if we shun them, and so we have to be very careful when we're considering how we're going to treat our young people, and that raises a question in Anishinaabe communities as well. Is only men in some communities, only men can sit at the big drum. So what about women? What about women who want to sit there? What about women that identifies as men? You know, there's all kinds of questions, and we mustn't let hate or any of those terrible beliefs enter our minds. And so that this poses a question all over the place. Sweats, how do you when there's co-ed, or if they're all female and there's a male that identifies as a female, there's another subject. So all over the place there are issues related to or this understanding of where we fit within our traditional ceremony. And I think it's really up to everyone to do that work within their own community, and to be sensitive about it, but at the same time to listen to the elders, but also be there to guide the young people. They might feel rejected. They could feel not a part of it. They need to know that it's not about them. It could be about other things, so that they're not hurt by this. That they're finding a place for themselves in ceremony. So that's one. The other really good example of that is like that movie Whale Riders. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was about a Maori family, I think, and their ancient story is connected closely to the whales, and so as the grandfather teaches all the young boys how to be men, how to take on their traditional role, and it also is set against against some of their social issues and epidemics in their community, addiction and so on and so forth. It's very similar. It's a great portrayal of what Indigenous life might be like. I thought it was a great depiction. This young girl who does not want to be a boy, but she believes that she has the full rights to be a chief. Well, that's never heard of in their culture. So the grandfather, he shuns her away from learning the ways of what it means to be a chief. And he's only teaching the young men how to do it. Well, in the end, it turns out that she has this ancient spiritual connection to the whales, and she ends up going into the water and swimming with the whales. And such a powerful movie. If you haven't watched it before, I think it's called Whale Rider, and it's such a good story that describes again how gender, roles and sexual orientation and all these other things they combine, and so some of the social pressures that are happening in Indigenous community. So we're getting close to the end of my presentation, but we got a little 20 minutes left. So I really wanted to talk about in the last part of this presentation, what people are doing, or how do you feel, I guess, about 2Spirit? What does it mean to you? And I want this to be an open conversation, so no hold barred. I want people to feel okay to talk about what they want to talk about. I know people might not like that, and let's just be open minded, because you cannot stop ignorance if you always hide from it. If you always shun them, you have to let people speak openly and plainly on the matter. Otherwise, we'll never be able to quell it. So it is through soft, respectful, kind words that we're able to do that. Are there any questions or comments or statements that people would like to make? I guess it can be covered in chat. Angela, Chelsea, that we have 8 people participating in this so far. Is there any way we can open it up to volume to have them, or is that not possible to let them?
I can try. I'll need either Carrie.
It'd probably be good to stop sharing and put it to gallery mode, right? For questions.
So if one of the co-hosts wants to hit the security tab and then let us, I can do it here, I think. 1 second.
All right. I was just showing the photos that we shared earlier.
Okay, I've switched the settings so that we can unmute, but it doesn't always connect properly. So I'm gonna just mute myself and see if I can come back in. Oh, I can, perfect. So everyone in the room should be able to unmute their audio now.
Great, thank you so much. I like a little bit of freedom of expression, but I do understand the need to be able to control some of the discussion, especially if there's people that are not so respectful. So, does anybody want to say something or ask a question, perhaps?
You know what, Luke? I had, when I was working on my master's at Laurier, I had found a really great video, and I want to say it was the University of Alberta that they had done. And I remember I used that in sharing in a presentation, and it was very valuable, right? Because I do feel like when I see some of these pictures and I hear about those teachings, you know, that our people identified 5 different ways, and that they were seen as gifted, and that they were our medicine people and our healers and stuff like that, ceremonial people. But I also understand how that colonization really impacted our people, right? Where their beliefs became our beliefs, where that was wrong, you know. And I think a lot of those who suffered through those residential school times had a lot of shame that carried with that, right? So I always found it very disheartening when I would hear an elder say that our people weren't like that. And when I hear that, I know that they don't have all the teachings. You know, I know that they don't have that open mind. You know, I worry when I hear those knowledge keepers express that that wasn't our people's way, because it really makes me understand that they don't know, right? And what they're doing is causing to our community, and still living that colonial lifestyle. So yeah, I just think it's awesome. But I say Miigwech for sharing.
Thanks so much. I think that's a hard part for a lot of people, because a lot of our elders that are the knowledge keepers are people that have that attitude, and it's like, how do you get around that? Well, I think the bottom line is you take what you can, from the positive aspects of those elders. It's just like anything else. We don't have to take on their attitudes and beliefs, but we can learn the ceremony through them, because they are the last of the people to know and do these things. So it's really incredibly important that we recognize that. Excuse me, sorry. Short of that, we kind of had that same issue in my community. Well, I'll just tell you the story. We had a sing. Iroquois people have this thing called a sing every spring and fall, in which all of the territories get together, their singing societies get together, and they sing women's dance songs that they made up. Excuse me, sorry. That they made throughout the year. And so it's not a competition, it's just to hear these songs that are being made. And it's really the important part of the sing is the meeting that takes place right afterwards, after everybody's done singing. And the singing groups will talk about the state of their community, and they'll talk about what's happening in their communities with respect to helping out and making sure that the culture is surviving and that people are still doing the right thing, taking care of the elders. And so they do this big report. It's a really, really awesome part of me. Well, that evening they have a big social, and there's usually 400 or 500 young people from different Haudenosaunee communities, and it's like really awesome, right? Like the dancing, the whole longhouse is just, wherever they're at, it's just packed. And hundreds of people dancing at once, and so it's like the most amazing feeling ever. Well, a few years ago, Oneida hosted one of these said events, and so I was there, and hanging out and dancing and everything. And I'm a big part of the traditional community. And this guy comes up to me from Ganawage, Mohawk, and he says, "Hey, do you want to dance?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." I get up there. I never realized that it was actually that it was rabbit dance. And in the rabbit dance, a man and a woman will hold hands. They'll lock hands together and they'll do it in a circle. They'll dance in a motion and they'll go forward. And oh man, I never sweat so much in my life. There was just like, I didn't realize there was just buckets of water coming down my face, and because there were 300 people in the longhouse at the time, and there were 600 eyeballs on me. and so one of the ladies comes up, and she goes, she's from Ganawage, and so they have that Ganawage accent, Mohawk accent. She goes, "This dance is supposed to be dance between a man and a woman." And my partner, who's also from Ganawage Mohawk, he says, "Oh, fuck off." And I was like, "Did he just really say that?" And so we danced right till it was over. And then we were the talk of the town. We were the people who were going to bring in the apocalypse. So, and I remember my father even leaving at that point, leaving the social. This was early on when I came out, and leaving the social. And he came home and he told my mom, he goes, "You know what your son did? Your son." He said, "Your son danced with another man at the longhouse." And my mom says, "So?" She says, "He's your son. You have to accept him no matter which way he comes." And my mom likes telling me that story anyway. And my dad, he was kind of upset about it, but he was okay after a while. But it was a big thing, and it was the talk of all the Iroquois communities for a while, was that two guys danced the rabbit dance at the longhouse, and therefore we were going to bring the end of the world as we know it. But and usually there's an overabundance of women. The women to men ratio at socials is such that there's always more women than there are men. So there's sometimes two women dancing together. Did they bring an end to the world? Actually, now that I think about it, maybe I did. Maybe I did bring it into the world. But it's those kinds of stories that come up, that show you the limitations to and some of the things that we have to deal with in our community. And that guy that I danced with became a lifelong friend, and who was a language teacher. It's funny, because people will try to hurt you in whatever way they can. That lateral violence is so present in our communities. It is still very much existent, and I'm part Chinese as well. I'm Oneida and Chinese. I'm a quarter Chinese and 3/4 Oneida. And I remember when kids found out, they would make fun of me, and because I went to school on reserve, right? And as I got older, it really bothered me a lot. And I thought to myself, well, they're busy saying that I'm not Oneida, but yet I speak Oneida, and they don't speak Oneida. I go to longhouse ceremonies and dance in the Oneida way, and they don't go to longhouse ceremonies and dance in the Oneida way. And I thought, well, I know who I am, and this is part of who I am. Language, that my language is critically endangered. There's only 15 people left in the world that speak the Oneida language. And we really have a lot of work to do. I started a school about 2016. It's called Dodadi Onyataaga Yudadi Honyanit, which is, Oneida, we will speak again. And so we're doing a lot of things to try to make a comeback. A lot of, and I think we have to look to two-spirited people to help do that. Because when I go to different communities from across the Haudenosaunee, it's a lot of the two-spirited people who are picking up the language, who are doing the ceremonies, who are, and there's a lot of our people out there that are trying to keep our way of life alive. Why is that so important? Why do we have to keep our way of life alive? They say there was a story one time. They talk about the Creator said that the people of the earth had stopped giving thanks for his creation for the things that he gave to them. And so he sent his messengers, the eagles, out to all four corners of the earth. And he said, I want you to go and look for ceremonial smoke. I want you to go and look for the Thanksgiving. And so those eagles flew far and for days, even weeks, to get across the lands. And every eagle came back reporting that there was no ceremonial smoke. And the Creator said, if these people that I've created are not giving thanks for what I've given them, then I think I should end this now. And he was going to destroy all life. And then, but the one eagle did not report back. They waited for him. Finally, eagle comes in. He says, I saw ceremonial smoke, last eagle. And so the Creator went and he saw the smoke coming from the forest's edge. And it was an old man and an old woman with their two grandchildren. And they were singing and dancing and feasting. And they were doing all those old ceremonies, giving thanks to creation. So the Creator went to those old people and he said, you're the only ones. He said, and I'm going to let the world live because of you. You're going to live because of you. So we owe all our lives to that one old couple that raised those two children. And so for many years I grew up, I never seen an eagle fly around Southern Ontario. The eagles weren't around, the only time I ever saw an eagle was when I went to the Toronto Zoo. and then all of a sudden the eagles are back. There's all kinds of eagles. I see them flying. Bald eagles, golden eagles. And I think it's a message to our community and to all the people that we have to start getting back to our Thanksgiving, to our ceremonial way of life. We have to do more than that. It has to become enculturated. We have to have a culture of sustainability. We have to look at our ways and what we've been doing to Mother Earth, and we have to find a new way. No more trips to Walmart. Just but there's an example of what we need to do in our own community to start curbing what's happening right now in the world. We're starting to feel it. Our children are definitely, we may most likely see this change in our own lifetime. And are we prepared for that? So we have to look to our ceremonies and prophecy to help us do that. And the 2Spirit people are the connected people to Spirit, to land, and they can help us, help all of us. Let's see here. Oh, sorry. Are there any more questions or comments in our chat? Okay, so we still have a few minutes left, so I don't want to completely close this off yet. So
Nothing in the chat.
oh, sorry. I'm on my phone now, remember, so I have to pardon? Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I think I like to say Nyao Go for all the sharing you've done today. It's very nice for you to share your story. Very courageous as well, because some of these personal stories are hard to tell, right? But they're important. So I like to say Nyao Go for that. And, yeah, and it's important for everybody to hear these stories. So.
Oh. Nyao Go Gui.
Oh.
I often tell that that rites of passage story, that Modua song that the boys will sing. Really, really important song. Really important to teach why we sing it. They say that there was a time when the man had forgotten his responsibility to feed the people, to feed the elders and the children. And they used to run off and hunt for a long time. You would go off and you would stay. And they said, why should we go back? We're having a lot of fun out here, And so they never did. And so the Creator saw this, and he came, and he sent a messenger, Odua. And so he sang that song from the mountains, and you could hear it all around the land, the song that he sang. And it was so beautiful. They say that it changed the heart of men. That song was so beautiful. And so they decided, they came home and they fed the elders and the children. But from that day forward, after they went home and they realized what they did was wrong, we had to recognize that through ceremony. And so when a young man's voice changes and you hear that crackle, that's when it's time for him to learn his Odua song. Because that song, he'll go up and he'll stand by the fire in his clan, and he'll declare to the people that he will walk the red road, that he'll walk the high path, and this will be his way of life and his way of being. He will protect the women and the children. He will feed the old people. And so that's a declaration. It's a thanksgiving. It's a thanksgiving to life. And so that is one of the stories that I was told about how Odua came. And it's one that we have to continue to impress upon our young men, because so many of them are growing up and not getting the right teachings, and they're hurting our women, and they're not taking care of the children. And so these are, again, these are the issues of our day, and we have a responsibility to that. So I just wanted to say to everyone, Yongo, for tuning in and participating and listening in to me. And as I walk along my own path of life, I'm always trying to stay open to new ideas and concepts and ways of being, so long as that at the basis of it is compassion, love, and kindness, wisdom, trust, bravery, and care. These are things that our forefathers left for us, so that we can continue to have them, and in our way of being. That's why, even though our land has been dispossessed, even though our resources have been taken, you never hear of us blowing up buildings or doing something or sending anthrax or doing something terrible like that, because because our teachings specifically prohibit that. Haudenosaunee people, we are the people of peace. Skana. That we'll be of one mind on this matter. That we are the people of peace. And so that I say to you, to those that are listening, to continue your good work wherever it might be. Bring peace, love, compassion, righteousness to the work, and all will have a place at the table. Yeah.